A military, also known collectively as armed forces, is a heavily armed, highly organized force primarily intended for warfare. It is typically officially authorized and maintained by a sovereign state. After collecting data from Global Firepower Index, I compiled a list of top 10 most powerful militaries of the world. So let's discover. The Pakistan Army is the land service branch of the Pakistan Armed Forces. The roots of its modern existence trace back to the British Indian Army that ceased to exist following the partition of the Indian subcontinent, resulting in the Parliamentary Act that established the sovereign state of Pakistan as the Dominion of Pakistan from the United Kingdom on August 14, 1947. With the defense budget of $12.275 billion and total number of 1,704,000 military personnel, Pakistan Armed Forces ranked at the 10th place. The Brazilian Armed Forces is the unified military organization comprising the Brazilian Army, including the Brazilian Army Aviation, the Brazilian Navy, including the Brazilian Marine Corps and Brazilian Naval Aviation, and the Brazilian Air Force. Brazil's armed forces are the second largest in the Americas, after the United States. With the defense budget of $29.3 billion and total number of 2,074,500 military personnel, Brazilian Armed Forces ranked at the 9th place. The British Armed Forces, also known as Her Majesty's Armed Forces, are the military services responsible for the defense of the United Kingdom, its overseas territories and the Crown dependencies. Since the formation of the Kingdom of Great Britain in 1707, later succeeded by the United Kingdom, the armed forces have seen action in a number of major wars involving the world's great powers, including the 7 Years' War, the American Revolutionary War, the Napoleonic Wars, the Crimean War, the First World War, and the Second World War. With the defense budget of $56.04 billion and total number of 275,000 military personnel, British Armed Forces ranked at the 8th place. The French Armed Forces encompass the Army, the Navy, the Air and Space Force, the National Guard, and the Gendarmerie of the French Republic. The President of France heads the armed forces as chef d'armes. It has the largest armed forces in size in the European Union. With the defense budget of $47.70 billion and total number of 450,000 military personnel, French Armed Forces ranked at the 7th place. The Republic of Korea Armed Forces, also known as the ROK Armed Forces, are the armed forces of South Korea. The Republic of Korea Armed Forces were founded in 1948, following the establishment of the South Korean government after Korea's liberation from the Empire of Japan. South Korea's military forces are responsible for maintaining the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the state, and also engage in peacekeeping operations and humanitarian, disaster relief efforts worldwide. With the defense budget of $48 billion and total number of 6,710,000 military personnel, Republic of Korea Armed Forces ranked at the 6th place. The Japan Self-Defense Forces, also known as the Self-Defense Forces, SDF, or Japanese Armed Forces, are the unified military forces of Japan that were established by the Self-Defense Forces Law in 1954. They are controlled by the Ministry of Defense, with the Prime Minister as Commander-in-Chief. With the defense budget of $51.7 billion and total number of 319,000 military personnel, Japan's Self-Defense Force ranked at the 5th place. The Indian Armed Forces are the military forces of the Republic of India. It consists of 3 professional uniformed services: the Indian Army, Indian Navy, and Indian Air Force. President of India is the Supreme Commander of the Indian Armed Forces. The Indian Armed Forces are under the management of the Ministry of Defence of the Government of India. With the defense budget of $73.65 billion and the total number of 5,127,000 military personnel, Indian Armed Forces ranked at the 4th place. The People's Liberation Army (PLA) is the regular armed forces of the People's Republic of China (PRC), and the armed wing of the PRC's founding and ruling political party, the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. Besides the Central Military Commission, CMC, and several minor units directly under it, the PLA has 5 major service branches: the Ground Force, Navy, Air Force, Rocket Force, and the Strategic Support Force. A majority of military units around the country are assigned to one of 5 theater commands by geographical location. With the defense budget of $178.2 billion and total number of 3,355,000 military personnel, People's Liberation Army ranked at the 3rd place. The Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, commonly known as the Russian Armed Forces, are the military forces of the Russian Federation. They are divided into the Ground Forces, Navy, and Aerospace Forces. There are also 2 independent arms of service: Strategic Missile Troops and the Airborne Troops. Under the Federal Law of Russia, the Russian Armed Forces, along with the Federal Security Service, FSB, Border Troops, the National Guard, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, MVD, the Federal Protective Service, FSO, the Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR, the Main Directorate of the General Staff, GRU, and the Ministry of Emergency Situations, EMERCOM, civil defense form Russia's military services, and are under direct control of the Security Council of Russia. With the defense budget of $42.129 billion and total number of 3,569,000 military personnel, Armed Forces of the Russian Federation ranked at the 2nd place. The United States Armed Forces are the military forces of the United States of America. It consists of the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, and Coast Guard. The President of the United States is the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and forms military policy with the Department of Defense, DoD, and Department of Homeland Security, DHS, both federal executive departments, acting as the principal organs by which military policy is carried out. All 6 armed services are among the 8 uniformed services of the United States. With the defense budget of $740.5 billion and total number of 2,245,500 military personnel, military forces of the United States of America ranked at the 1st place.